the President-elect of the United States, Barack H. Obama.
On January 20th, 2009, the world witnessed history.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
It's an event that I would not have missed for anything.
This is truly an historic moment.
It's a great day for America and a great day for democracy.
And many would agree. After over 200 years of American history, which included slavery, segregation, and the civil rights struggle, descendants of slaves who had actually built the White House could say they have finally seen a black man call that house home. It's that historical journey and many others like it that had a lot of people, in particular blacks, reflecting on past struggles and celebrating how far the world has come. One place in particular where the idea of a black president is especially symbolic is in the small town of Buxton, Ontario. What was the emotion like in Buxton when you heard that a black man...
I'm gonna cry.
When you heard that a black man was being elected?
Why are you going to make me cry?
While many black Canadians came to Canada in different ways, as loyalists, freemen, immigrants, and refugees, our story begins 200 years ago in Buxton, Ontario. This small community became the home to many American slaves looking for freedom. And as Shannon Prince, the curator of the local museum, explains, January 20th, 2009 proved to be an emotional day for all that still call Buxton home. What was it like for, especially the elders of the community when they saw? Did they ever think they would?
Oh, yes. No, they didn't.
Think they'd ever see that day?
No, they didn't. They didn't. And I think that's really what's sticking in my mind.
Because they remember probably more what it was like.
Yes, they do. They do. You know, not being able to go into restaurants, not being able to, sit at a show, sit on the floor at a show. And for them to see that in their lifetime, that was just so powerful.
I forgot.
Earl Prince didn't think he would see this day. He still remembers his experience with segregation years ago.
Went to a restaurant and they didn't think that, said they didn't cater to colored people. That was my first, I guess. Maybe I was 18 then. And
that was your first experience of being
different.
Buxton was different. People would walk for months from the American Deep South to get here, anticipating the sound of a bell that would signify they were home. And while Buxton doesn't make it in Canadian textbooks, the story is an important one to tell. There are well-known stories like Mary Ann Shadd's, the first black woman to own and operate her own newspaper, and the first black woman to vote in a U.S. federal election.
And this is Mary Ann that we talked about earlier, and this is her press, actually, that she had in her home. They lived one lot west of the settlement, so this is what she had in her house to print newsletters and flyers about different people that have arrived here safely.
And there are journeys like Anne Marie Weems, a slave that disguised herself as a man to escape. Both women were once residents of Buxton, Ontario, and left an amazing legacy behind. But even the story of this small community's beginnings is simply remarkable.
Well, this settlement was founded in 1849 by a white Presbyterian minister by the name of Reverend William King. Now, he was opposed to slavery, but it married into a slaveholding family, and eventually, through a variety of circumstances, he acquired 15 slaves.
But according to historians, William King was a reluctant slave owner and would eventually return to Scotland to become a minister. He would later be sent to Toronto as a missionary, bringing his 15 American slaves with him.
So when the Presbyterian Church in Toronto found out that here was this white man coming to the land of freedom with slaves, they were quite perturbed. So basically, he turned the tables around to ask them if there was any place where he could bring his former slaves and where other free blacks could come for the betterment of life.
But Canada wasn't always the coveted land of freedom. Slavery had been abolished just a few years earlier.
In 1628, that's the first slave that was brought from Madagascar over to New France, which is now Quebec. So this is one style of a slave ship.
Wow.
This is 2 bunks. Sometimes they were 3 bunks high, but this is 2 bunks.
So a slave would literally sleep in one of these?
Not one slave.
Not one?
Not one. Sometimes 2, 3, 4, depending on how many they had.
Wow.
And in 1793, Sir John Graves Simcoe, this was Upper Canada then, he passed a law for the gradual abolition of slavery. And his law said no more slaves can come into Canada, but if you're already a slave here, you'd remain one until you died. If you had children, they would remain a slave until they reached the age of 25, and grandchildren would be born free.
Wow.
And then it was completely abolished in Canada and the British Empire, August the 1st, 1834.
By the time William King arrived, he was able to find several acres of land owned by the British Crown that would eventually become the new home of free slaves, even though many white settlers in surrounding areas were afraid of the impact their new neighbors would have. But that didn't stop Reverend King, who would go on to build a school and a church as Buxton continued to grow.